trauma coach. So she helps women who are in difficult, painful situations, and they are tired of being stuck in it, especially if they've got any kind of sexual trauma in the background. Did I kind of get that right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So what
and
I
hopefully
do.
everybody knows me. I'm a women's narcissist recovery coach, and I use things like essential oils and crystals and metaphysical tools, and I also use cutting edge trauma tools, and I help women really create great relationships with the people that they love, even if the people that they love are narcissists, or even if the problem isn't that you need to stay with the narcissist. The problem is that you really need to go, and you need some help and some support and some guidance through that. So we decided to hook up together and do a great conversation on how to get your sexy back, how women can get their sexy back after sexual trauma. And so today, do you remember what our title was? It was
the Tantra of Consciousness, wasn't it?
Yes, the Tantra of a Conscious Woman.
Yes.
Exactly. And we both love the idea, or at least I do, and what Fanny and I were talking about. We both love the topic and the idea of wholeness, of integration, of bringing together, the parts of you which are more aggressive and more firm, and the parts of you which are gentle and softer and more caring. And the way that one way to do this is through physical things you do, which are Tantra, physical things you do to integrate all the different parts and pieces of yourself, so you become a whole person instead of just a fractured person. Did I kind of get that? Did I get that on the right path, Fanny?
Yes,
did
absolutely.
I describe that well?
Yes, I think you did. Especially the part about going from fractured to a holistic whole person, because that's what trauma and sexual trauma does to us. It kind of fractures us and our personality into bits. So healing and healing work is really about becoming whole again.
Yeah. I mean, literally on a physical level, when something negative happens to us that we aren't able to figure out or process through, literally it looks like we're fractured inside of our brain and inside of our body, because the stress chemicals start to create walls, almost like a maze in our brain and in our body. And I like to use the feeling or the idea of a pane of glass, that's been dropped on the ground, and it's fractured. But in Asian medicine beliefs, when something is broken like that, you turn it into a work of art.
Exactly.
You turn it into a higher, something that calls to God on some spiritual, metaphysical level. That's your heart's expression. You're supposed to take those fractured pieces and treat them like mosaics, and stitch them together using different colored threads and different techniques, whichever's best for the moment, to recreate yourself into something that isn't, now I'm broken and now I'm whole, but instead you're something that's greater than both, because now you have this layer of beauty around you, because you've fixed yourself. Oh, that's me going loquacious.
Yeah, and I think in Japan they actually have this art form about this, about putting broken pottery back together with gold linings and such, and seeing the pot or the object as being more beautiful and more personal and more than it was before it was broken. So transforming into something higher than it was before. And I think the same applies to us humans when we heal from trauma.
I sure believe that too. Some of my favorite people are people who, because they've had to go through and process through and have been both victim and perpetrator of pain on other people, those are the people that are more whole, because we can't let go of our humanity. We're going to do things which are insensitive. We're going to do things which are thoughtless. We're going to hurt one another. And when we can embrace that vulnerability and those weak parts of ourselves, and recognize that they make us more beautiful, I think that's when someone thinks in that way, like you and I do, they're naturally going to be drawn to the topic of Tantra.
Mm. Yes,
because
exactly.
Tantra is about making something beautiful out of the broken.
Yes, exactly. So I just want to add this definition, because I think many people have the idea that Tantra is this weird Indian thing with strange lovemaking positions, but that's not actually what Tantra is about. It's about becoming whole and becoming in touch with your energy and your physical body, and connecting your mind and your body and your soul. And like you said, making yourself whole again.
Yeah, and that's why I always loved the topic. You know, I first got introduced to Tantra when I started my own healing process, and I started it intensely when I joined massage school. And when I joined massage school, one of the instructors said, you know, oh, you're going to be going out west, and you should look up someone who's a tantric healer. And I thought, well, that's certainly interesting and curious. And so then I went to this woman's house, and she was on the outskirts of Las Vegas, and we talked for like an hour and a half, and she gave me a few breathing exercises to work with the different work with the different chakras. She gave me a few visualizations to work with them, and that was it. And what struck me was Tantra at its core is getting back in touch with your body.
Exactly. Usually through movement and breathing and sound. But it's really just about becoming comfortable in your body again, which is something I think every trauma survivor wants. That I know that's what I wanted, because it can oftentimes feel like our body, but like we're completely out of touch with our body after trauma. Like we just live up here and we're cut off from under the neck. So Tantra really is an excellent tool for healing that body-mind connection again.
Yeah, because so as a massage therapist, I would study how people's physical bodies healed, and part of my extensive training over the last 14 years is how people's bodies hold on to physical memories. Their nervous system holds on to a physical injury even after the injury is healed. So you can look at someone and you can see that their arm is held close to their body, and it could be a pattern of movement because they broke their arm when they were a child. And it just, that part of their body never got told. Nobody ever gave it the memo that it was healed. And because of that, it would get less movement. It would get less attention. It would get less tending. And what happens when we don't pay attention to something is it starts to get stagnant and get sick. And things don't move. And emotion, the chemicals of emotion, of anger and frustration and hurt and overwhelm, they get kind of like packed away, like in a swamp, you know, where they take all your used cars and old tires and you just throw it in the swamp so it sinks underneath the water so nobody can see it.
Yes,
and so, yeah, your arm can then be filled with congestion. And Tantra helps us get the movement back in our body so we can release that and our body can heal itself. And we also heal ourselves emotionally. Is that kind of on track?
Yes, it is. I just wanted to add that there is actually an excellent book I could recommend about how trauma affects the body. That's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It is.
I've got it on my shelf. Yep.
As a trauma survivor, I highly recommend it. It's exactly what Rita talked about, how our traumatic experiences get stuck in our bodies, and we may have pains or limitations in our movements. I know for me, I had, after my trauma, my traumatic experience, I had a horrible.
Do you want to give the audience just a brief snippet of that so they know what you mean when you say your trauma experience, but just absolutely. As much as you want.
Yeah. So when I was 14, I was sexually assaulted by a stranger, and I had no way of dealing with it. I tried to tell my teacher, but they unfortunately told me that it was self-inflicted, which added to the shame and guilt and the fear of reaching out. So I dealt with it the only way I could, only way I knew how, by trying to pretend that it never happened, by trying to suppress all my feelings. And due to that, I actually had the most horrible back pain for years. At one point, it was so bad that I couldn't get out of bed for 3 weeks. And I was in every doctor's test, every MRI and everything, and they found nothing physically wrong with my back. But
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Thank you. It was a difficult time, but the important thing, and why I'm sharing this, is because after I started to process all those painful feelings and go through those memories and actually allow my body to begin to release the pent-up trauma energy, it slowly went away. So, which was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. And on a body level, let's see if we can visualize this, right? So when we're in a place of fear, or actually when our amygdala is hijacking our brain and causing our brain and our nervous system to be dysregulated, we will need to hold that tension somewhere. And because it's almost unbearable. And some people hold it in their shoulders or their hands or their jaw or their whatever. Or other people, will swim for miles and miles and miles or bike for miles and miles to move it through. And so when it's kind of like the arm thing again, when we've got unresolved or unreleased stress, it has to be held somewhere. And many times, if it's a power thing, we hold it in our belly and our lower back, and that stays locked down. And it almost takes like the jaws of life, that rip open the cars like a tin can. It almost takes something of that magnitude to try to get that relaxed and reopened again. And so when it's frequently locked down, if it's triggered a lot, then once again we start with that congestion problem. And then if you hadn't dealt with your stress, your backache probably would have turned into more digestive problems as well.
Yeah.
And then it would have turned into female problems. And then it would have turned into a toxic system, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, cancer, something like that. Yeah. So you were brilliantly smart. Thank you for taking care of your problems and not allowing them to hijack you and ruin your life, like happens to so many of us for so long. I mean, I'm 48, so I can't talk. I've been through my own my own meat grinder. Okay, where were we?
We were talking about
Oh, your back pain. Your back pain. And yeah, so and your process through that, and I sidelined you, but oh well.
No, that's okay. But that's what I actually also learned during my healing process and my research and my studying, because I used to think that emotions were logical mental things. Like I used to think that when I'm angry, it was because of the narrative I had in my mind. It was like, I am angry because that person was rude towards me and said this mean thing. And I tried to think my way out of the emotion. So if I felt ashamed or guilty for not wanting to make love with my boyfriend, or about something else that happened, or about my trauma, I tried to talk myself logically out of it and be like, okay, I have no reason to feel shamed. I have no reason to feel guilty. So I'm just going to choose that I don't feel ashamed or guilty. But it doesn't work.
How did you get the foresight, the wherewithal, the ability? One of the things that women tell me all the time is the hardest thing is after they trigger, you know, they can't remember that the best thing to do is to pause, is to wait, to deal with the problem first. How did you have the presence of mind to be able to say, I'm not going to feel guilty?
It was a process, but what I did was, if I understood your question correctly, what I did was, when I felt guilty, instead of trying to deny the feeling, I allowed myself to feel it in my body. So it would be like a lump in my throat, or a tingling in my stomach, or a piercing pain through my chest. And instead of focusing on the story, the narrative about the feeling, I was actually focusing on the somatic sensations, the energy of the feeling in my body.
Okay. Now you used some pretty big words there, which, you know, as a massage therapist, honestly, it took me at least like 10 years into my career to realize what somatic meant. So, could you explain that again, maybe in a way that that feels like it's just a little bit broader in perspective?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the feedback. So feelings are actually sensations in our bodies. That's what they are. They are energy that we feel as a physical sensation, in the same way as we feel the need to drink or use the bathroom. And when I said somatic, I meant what I felt in my body. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. So you didn't focus so much on being in your head.
No,
you took it out of your head and brought it back down to your body.
Exactly. I did a lot of work with that, and tried to, and still work with this whenever I get triggered or have a strong emotion. The first thing I do is always to try to switch off the thinking part of my mind and put all my attention on how I feel physically in my body, and actually go through every part of my body, like doing a mental check, noticing, okay, I'm holding some tension in my shoulders and my neck, and I feel a pressure in my chest, and my stomach feels squirmy, or it feels like there is a cold black ball in my abdomen. And really try to focus and put all my attention on how my body feels. what sensations I feel in my body, to process.
Now, for me, I had to turn it into a rule. I had to just make it a rule for myself. And then I had to put things around me that would help me stick to that rule. You know, because it's like when I feel crazy and I feel stressed and locked down, I can't think rationally. I can't think my way, you know, I was saying this morning, I can't think my way out of, nobody can think their way out of a paper bag when they are, you know, when they're dysregulated, when they're stressed like that. And so we end up in these these spaces where we really don't know, should I yell at them? Should I get angry? Should I storm away? Should I slam the door? Should I stand here and take it while inside of myself I'm being ripped to shreds? You know, so here are all those questions that we're dealing with, and not quite knowing what the right thing to do is. And I can unequivocally agree with you, Fanny, that the way to get out of that frozen, don't know what to do, don't know what to say space is to focus on things in your body when you feel stressed. Give them the attention that they need and that they're looking for. And when you do that, then your brain calms down.
Exactly. And the feeling actually begins to change when you focus long enough on the physical sensations in your body. When you have an emotional reaction, a strong emotional reaction, you may notice that it begins as a pressure in your chest. But after you've focused on that for a while, it may change into a lump in your throat or pain in your stomach. And you just keep what you do to process through the emotion, to have it live out its full curve and change into a more pleasant feeling emotion, is just to follow the strongest physical sensation and keep track of it.
Yeah, just keep track of it as it works through your body. Rumi calls it, my favorite author, Rumi, really, poet, such beautiful romantic work. He would call it polishing the mirror. And so what happens is when we have a traumatic experience, it's like those layers, you know, like Shrek says, you know, the layers of the onion. Yes. Well, that's been around for a million years. When we have a bad experience, there isn't just one feeling. There's, you know, maybe shame and guilt and fear and anxiety and blame. I mean, there's a whole suitcase full of things. And then every time somebody came along and reminded us of it, you know, they added another layer, another thing in that box. And so your body has to, on some level, your body has to experience what it wasn't safe to experience before. And the way to do that is you get yourself in a safe, beautiful space with people, possibly. People are way helpful to help hold that beautiful sacred space, whether it's on video, whether it's in person, whether it's just by intention or a prayer circle, so that you feel safe and held, and allow yourself to have the feelings that you couldn't let yourself have when situations first happened. Now, for most people, what happens is because they don't feel safe, they react. And they react in a way which can be volatile and destructive to themselves, destructive to other people. Me, I mean, I can't tell you how many times Steve would light a candle and I would just have to outright reject him, you know, because I couldn't handle the stress and the expectation of, what am I going to have to do? How am I going to have to do this? Am I going to have to perform? You know, am I going to do it right? When can this be done? Why is this still happening to me? I mean, there were all those feelings that went back to the original painful things that had happened, but I could only access them when I was in a high stress. And if I didn't give myself the nurturing that I needed, and there wasn't anyone else around to give me the nurturing that I needed, then I just stayed in that place of being scared. But when we notice that we're scared because we're reacting in some way that we don't like or doesn't feel good, then when we love ourselves by doing something like Tantra, doing something that's actually loving for ourselves, breath work or singing or vibrational therapy or tuning forks or listening to your favorite song on the radio or humming or being in a shower and the vibration of the shower or anything that gets you back in touch.
What really helped me a lot was actually physically shaking my body. Whenever I had an intense emotional reaction, I would start shaking my body all over to get that energy moving.
Yeah, just like an antelope after it's been chased by a lion. Exactly. You have to get all the adrenaline out. I don't know about you, but some of the scariest moments of my life where I have felt like I had to stand up for myself, even though it might have just been my own fear. You know, the situation was probably perfectly safe and no, I'm not going to minimize it. The situation was safe, but I was reacting as if the situation were unsafe. But I was doing it anyways. I was saying the thing anyways, because I was going to plant my flag in the fact that I was safe enough to say these things. When I would do that, my whole body would release all the adrenaline that had been built up, almost like an unwinding. And one of my favorite quotes, I don't know who said it, but it's a powerful woman. You need to speak. You need to speak even if your voice shakes.
Yes. Because
it's about loving yourself enough that you're going to keep yourself safe. You're going to find resources. You're going to respect yourself. That you can face and honor. Yeah, that you can face the things which at the time, as a young child or adolescent, at the time when it happened, you had to take it all into a ball and shove it somewhere, maybe your stomach or your back, because you weren't in a safe enough place to heal it. And you have to consciously decide you're ready to heal something and create a safe space for yourself, like these live streams with us, a safe space where you can start to get in touch with who you are again.
Yes.
Should we have them do some exercises today? And what kind of exercises should we have them do?
I think something that involves breath work and movement would be easy and easy to apply also in
okay
after the breath work. No, after the
so let's yeah. So well, we can do it with them together. You know, maybe on part of this live stream. You know, we'll do it, and they can do it with us. If you're kind of scanning your mind for an exercise or a tool that you like, the question I would have is, give me a scenario when I could use this tool, when this tool would be really effective, whatever one we're going to teach them next.
Okay, well, the first one that pops into my mind is the breathing technique we talked about in the first video, because that's the most useful, or has been the most useful for me.
So, and me too. I've used that one quite a bit because it's inconspicuous. No one can see really, only if they're really dialed in can they see that you're regulating your breathing.
Exactly.
So you can do this even if you're on stage. Even what?
Even in public, even around people. Yep. You don't have to excuse yourself.
Yep. Yeah. And you know, my problem is, I remember when I was in junior high, there was another, the person who had abused me as a kid had re-entered my life, and it was very uncomfortable for me. And because it was uncomfortable for me, I started to pee myself, like whenever I would get anxious or nervous or scared when I was in junior high. And because that was my body's natural reaction. And I, soldier on. I was a cheerleader. I was in band. I was an academic. I still did all of those really great things. All the while, my nervous system would freak out at a moment's notice, and I might pee myself. In fact, it ended up with a nickname called Fish. They broke into my locker. They wrote Fish on the inside of my locker. I mean, it was
to go through that.
It's normal junior high stuff now that I'm like, thank God, I would have never survived this day and age. Oh, it would have been terrible. The hazing and stuff that happens. But, so if I had had this breathing technique then, that I could do while I was still, I remember one time where I was on the gym floor. It was a junior high basketball game, and I was on the gym floor, and we're doing a cheerleading routine, and we're standing there waiting to start, and I'm peeing myself at the same time, ready to do the cheerleader thing. And I did, and I followed through, and just hoped that nobody saw or thought it was sweat or, whatever. You soldiered on. And so our body reacts in really strong ways to stress that we shouldn't be embarrassed about, and we shouldn't be ashamed about, because it's just our nervous system reacting. But there are tools like the breathing one you're going to show them that keep you calmer so that you can make good decisions. You cannot embarrass yourself, because your nervous system is tuned so high from stress. You're able to represent yourself well. So this next breath tool is really good for when you need to look still calm and cool and collected, because that's who you choose to be, and it'll help your body calm down so that that's who you can be. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And what I like about it is that it's so simple. And like you said, Rita, you don't even have to excuse yourself from the company. You can just do it without anyone even knowing that you're regulating your nervous system and calming your nervous system down again. So you get from that fight, flight, or freeze state back into calm and centered and feeling normal by the breathing technique. And it's actually something that they teach to war veterans with PTSD. So it is absolutely perfect for survivors as well. And in all simplicity, it is just inhaling for 5 seconds and exhaling for 10 seconds. Or whatever.
So this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to set the scene so people can have a healing while they're on the call today, so they can use the breathing to regulate in real time. That's the difference. I come from a background of let's do it with a real situation and real time. So everybody, I want you to think about something recently that made you feel a little bit more tense. Maybe it was reading the newspaper this morning. Maybe it was going through your Facebook feed. Maybe it was something that either Fanny or I said, a triggering word or a memory that came up. Maybe it was your own judgment that came up in your head about how you're no good, or you'll never be a certain way, or that you're broken, or that it's everybody's fault. Think about something recently that not the big ones, but something that's kind of you'd like to clear out. Something you wish you could take off your shoulders and put down, that you could unload that burden. You could find a moment of peace in the chaos that's swirling around all of us. So think of something and tune into that. Let yourself feel it wherever it is in your body. Some people feel it in their belly. Some people may feel it in their heart. They may feel it in their throat, in their head, in their diaphragm. It may move around, as Fanny said. So I want you to feel, where you've got that level of tension. I want you to feel what it's like. I want you to be able to tolerate it. It's not comfortable, but it's tolerable. It's something that right this second you can tolerate it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So like Rita said, don't pick something that's like on the intensity level of like 8, 9, or 10 out of 10.
Yes.
Something smaller, like a 2 or 3 out of 10.
Yes. And just like Rumi says, that's a good point. And just like Rumi says, it's the polishing of the mirror. So if you work on the little things, like the driver that's following you too close, then it's a polishing of the mirror. And it takes a little bit of stress off of your system, and a little bit more stress off your system, and a little more stress off your system. So you can deal with the little things. You don't have to deal with the big, gigantic things. So if everybody's got something, I want you to, on a scale of 0 to 10, give it a number. Give it a number of, we're looking for something that's probably about the 4, 5, 6 range in tension. So make sure you're kind of in that window. And if that's where you are, all right. So now I think we've set the scene. I'm going to hand the football over to you, Fanny.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is inhale for 5 seconds and exhale for 10 seconds. It's very simple. So I'm going to do the counting and you're going to do the breathing.
Got it.
So let's start. Ready? Breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Now give it another number. It should be lower. Now, an exercise like this works on a lot of different levels, from compressing the vagus nerve to talking directly to your primitive brain. But what you're doing is you are telling your body that it's okay to let go of the emotions that you're feeling, that you don't have to hold on to them anymore. When you make the choice to regulate your breathing, it lets you subconsciously know that you can let go and you can heal and you can let your body heal.
Yes.
Because that's what it's been calling for.
And myself included, many people, when they do this breathing exercise, actually notice their muscles soften and their shoulders dropping and their body relaxing on the longer exhale. So it's releasing the pent-up emotional tension in our bodies.
And I know we were talking about before that sometimes so there was a daylight savings time. I'm going to tell everybody about the daylight savings time thing. So there was a daylight savings time thing where the time changed over where Fanny is.
Yes,
to
but
differently
over
mm-hmm.
and
right, exactly, and mine stayed the same. And so on both of our ends, I'm sure there was a little bit of guilt. There was a little bit of like, oh no, how could I miss this? Oh, that's terrible. There was a little bit of guilt. And as I was talking to Fanny earlier, I said, yes, however, even if guilt is deserved, it doesn't really do any good. Guilt gets in the way of you taking the next step forward and of your body healing itself and you getting into a better place. So as long as you let the guilt about anything, whether you deserve it or not, as long as you let that guilt get in the way of your healing, you're going to stay stuck. So if you feel too guilty to do breath work, put down the guilt and do the breath work anyways. And then when you're on the other side, you'll say, oh, now I get it. But you have to give yourself that loving first. And when you do that, when you're hurt, angry, in pain, when you do that first, instead of doing our normal patterns, getting angry and hurting other people or eating too much or shutting down, when we do that normal pattern, it doesn't serve anybody. So you just have to put, right or wrong, good or bad, you put the guilt down so it gets out of the way so you can make practical steps forward to healing yourself. And you found and I found that almost like a light switch.
Yes.
Almost like a light switch. It taps on or it taps off.
Yeah, because guilt can be a constructive emotion sometimes if it guides you to live more by your highest self and your morals and standards. But oftentimes it gets in the way of actually doing the work that the situation or your healing requires.
And the guilt is really, when they talk about veils in metaphysics and personal growth, they talk about, and spiritual growth, letting the veils drop. On a physiological, on a body, in your body, what that means is, if you ever felt guilty about something and you didn't resolve it, then those guilt chemicals are in your brain. And because they're in your brain, they're like dinosaur bones, which are still left in your brain, which don't have any relevance to whatever's going on right now. Guilt is just a feeling. And so the lesson we get when we have guilt is to stop feeling guilty. Put down the guilt and take whatever next step forward is. That's the lesson within the guilt I've always found for me. I don't know if you found that as well, but the answer always was, oh, because we're not supposed to feel guilty. We're supposed to love ourselves. It's a better use of our time.
Yes, I actually have this very radical idea. I don't think it should be radical, but it seems to be radical, that there is never any reason to feel ashamed of yourself or feel shame or hold on to guilt.
Yeah, there's no need. But a lot of people, they don't know how to let it down. And because they don't know how to let go of the guilt and how to let go of those dinosaur bones in their brain, those bookmarks, they end up stuck in the same pattern. And so one of the ways to let go of the guilt is the breathing exercise that you just did. Do you have another exercise that you use when you're feeling guilty or out of sorts to bring yourself back into balance?
Yes, actually, I usually do journaling. That's a big one for me. So if I feel guilty, I journal and write down what I'm feeling guilty about. And then I look at what I've written down and ask myself, how would I react if another person was in the similar situation, the same situation, and felt guilty? To see if the guilt is appropriate. And many times I notice that I'm actually feeling guilty over something that wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. And what I do then is to write a love letter to myself, to my guilt. Thank it for what it's trying to do, like acknowledge the feeling, give it a voice, give it a dignity, honor my internal experience, the unpleasant feeling of guilt, and write a love letter to myself where I really just say the things to myself that I would say to a 5-year-old who was feeling guilty. I would never blame them. I wouldn't point out their mistakes or repeat over and over again the things they did wrong, which is what I do when I feel guilty in my head to myself.
We all do.
If that doesn't work, just writing the letter, then I usually pick up a picture of myself when I was maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5, a picture where I'm happy and smiling, and look at that picture and ask myself, would I talk to this girl in the same manner as I am talking to myself right now?
That's a beautiful, beautiful way to do it. So did everybody hear that? Maybe you checked out. But what she said is she has a picture of herself in her own mind, and she talks to that picture. She talks to herself. The words actually in her head are telling that self that she loves them and that they're okay. And even if they did something that was insensitive or thoughtless to someone else, that it was okay, that it was fixable, that they were loved and lovable, and it was just part of learning and growing up. This is how we're supposed to talk to ourselves. And sometimes when you give yourself an image or a visual that's outside of yourself, it helps you have enough space to do it so that you can say the things that you want to hear. But when you're feeling angry, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling guilty, it doesn't mean that somebody is doing something to me. It means that there's a part of me that didn't get the attention and the nourishment that it needed. And now, because I'm an adult, it's my responsibility to make sure that that need gets met. And if I don't take responsibility for it, it's going to keep crying like that child, disconnected and alone and sad and thinking that everything that goes wrong in the world is their fault. And why should they bother? And what are they doing here? You know, you have to take yourself in hand. I have to love myself when I'm in those spaces, and I do. So as long as we keep thinking, you did this to me, it's your fault, why do you do this to me? Those are the actual words that are being imprinted in your head and in your heart. You have to make a conscious effort to surround yourself with loving messages, just like you would when you were a 5-year-old little girl. That's exactly, specifically what you need to do. Am I on target?
Yes, absolutely. And you worded it beautifully.
Good. Well, words should be beautiful if we can make them.
Exactly. So do you have anything you would like to add before we start finishing up? I see your time is...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have a class. That's right.
Our time is almost up.
Our time is almost up. Yes. If you don't know what to do something that makes you feel good. And if you do that, then you will come back into a space of being able to think clearly and make good decisions. And then you can make a good decision. So instead of waiting, days or weeks or months or years holding on to hurt or anger or guilt and trying to ignore it, instead love it right away. And then you'll notice that you're able to make really good progress in your life in a happy, healthy way. And if you want to find out more about that, you can go to my website at inspiremassage.com and find out how I work with women to heal themselves from narcissistic and toxic relationships. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. So what I'd like you to get out of this from what I said is that you can't think your way out of an emotion. You have to feel it physically. So if you're in a situation where you get very triggered and the breathing exercise we did together just doesn't seem to do it, it doesn't seem to make the entire emotion change. It just lowers it a bit, but you're still very high up on the scale of 1 to 10. Do some physical movement. Excuse yourself from the situation and jump up and down or wave your arms, go to the gym, shake your entire body, tense all your muscles and then relax them.
Laugh. Laughter is my favorite one. If you need to release tension, do something or watch something that's funny. Watch a comedian.
Exactly. And remember not to be hard on yourself. It's easier said than done, but please remember that that little innocent 5-year-old girl still lives within you as your inner child, and she hears everything you say to yourself because you're saying those things to her. So be gentle and kind and patient with yourself and speak to yourself like you would to that 5-year-old.
That was beautifully said as well. So where can people find you?
They can find me at erasemytrauma.com, which is a website where I share all the things I wish someone had told me about healing from sexual violence during my healing journey.
Thank you, Fanny. Thanks for having such a great day with us. And I'll see you soon, okay?
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.